In this next example, what I'd like to do is basically just pick up where we left off in the previous example, and all I want to do is add some server configuration parameters to that, as I note right here. And then when we test this, we could test this at a different port. That's one of the changes I'll be making. So as I scroll down here, I'm calling this object hello plus server config. Just as before, it extends ZIO app default. I have the hello route right here. And then I take that hello route and I put it into routes right here. And I have a note here to myself to see the top of the documentation for some simple routes examples. So let me go ahead and grab that and bring it over here. And all I wanted to do was show the top of this page. So you can see the URL here is routing routes right there. And again, routes models a collection of routes, each of which is defined by a pattern over here, a route pattern, and a handler over here on the other side. And as I note right here, this data type can be thought of as modeling a routing table, which decides where to direct every input in an API, based on both the method, such as the get method, and the path of the request as shown in these examples right here. And the reason I wanted to show the top of this page was because there are some really simple examples of how to create routes over here. So if you look at what I've been doing so far, I've created routes as a value over here, and then I take those values and I put them inside the routing table. And in the real world, I believe most people are probably going to do it this way. They'll create these values because what's going to go on is your handlers are going to become more and more complex in here. So you have all these values like this right here, and then you'll add all those values inside the routes constructor right here. But what they're doing in this page, and what I like for beginners, is it shows how to create routes one at a time inside of the routes constructor right here. So this has a first route, which is going to be a get request. The URI is /hello, and then they show the handler right here is going to be a text handler that returns hello. And then this one is going to be another get request. It's going to be at the health check URI, and that calls handler.ok. So this handler.ok gives you a nice little idea that there are some helper functions inside of here for common situations. And from there, if I just scroll down just a little bit more right here, this has those first two entries inside of routes right here, the exact same ones right there. And then the third line here, they handle a post request at the URI called echo. And what that does is it calls a handler, which is what I've been doing over here in our examples. And the handler has a request parameter. And what they're doing right here is they say from the request, let's get the body, let's convert that to a string, and then let's map that to a response. And in this case, the response is going to be text right there like that. So I just wanted to show that. I don't think I wanted to get into too much more here. It starts getting more complicated as you go down, but I just wanted to show you a couple of things. One is how short these routes can be for simple cases like that. And then the other is just that routes here is just going to be a collection of all the routes that you defined for your application. So I covered that. Let's get that out of the way there and come back here now. So that was that point right there. So in our application, we just have this one route there, hello route. It's defined up here as a value. It's a get request, it's /hello. And then we handle that with this handler right here, this response.text. And we're going to print this text when we get a get request on that URI right there. So all of that was a bit of a recap of the previous video. And now what I want to show here is this server configuration. So as I scroll up here, what I'm going to do with this one is we're going to create a server configuration. So instead of using the defaults like I did in the previous video, now we're going to pass in a server configuration into provide right here as a Z layer. So we're going to create a server configuration right here. We're just about to do that. Then we'll pass that in as a Z layer, and then we'll also use server.live. So I'll come back here in just a moment. But this is the usual run value and the server call right here. So this portion of the code you've seen before. And then what I had right here in the previous one was server.default. The new part is going to be the Z layer right here. So as I note in this area right here, what we're going to do is start with the server default configuration, these parameters right here. So we're going to start with this default configuration, and you can see all these values for the socket address is 8080, keep alive is true, and so on and so forth. All these other values that are right here, those are all the default values inside of the server object right there. So now when I come back here, I'm saying start with those default values. But now what I want is I want to run on port 9090. So that's the first one. That's a custom port. I have keep alive as true. That is the default, but I'm just showing that you can set that here. I show how to set the idle timeout, how to request decompression, and max header size right there is 8 kilobytes. So all I want to do in this example is just show how you can configure these. And again, when you click through, you can see all these parameters that you can configure. And there are a couple more in here. So there's an SSL config right there and a WebSocket config right there. So those are some things you might do in a real world application. So I have these commented out, but I just wanted to show that you can handle SSL. The syntax is going to look a little bit like that. And then you can handle the WebSocket configuration. That's going to look a little bit like that. But I just have these commented out for right now because we're not going to do that. But what I am doing is these configuration parameters right here. And again, now when we come down, actually, let me at least temporarily get rid of this so it's not so distracting. And also, I have a note down here. I forgot to mention that here. So in the previous video, I showed that we start with server and we say server.serve our application, and then we provide server.default. That's what we had before. And now the difference is we're saying server.serve the app, which is the same. Then we're saying provide this server configuration. We do that as a Z layer. So we use zlayer.succeed to provide this server configuration that we defined right here. And then instead of using server.default, we use server.live. And I have a note here that server.live requires explicit configuration. And that's exactly what we're doing, is providing this explicit configuration all right there. And a couple other notes while I'm here. Server.default comes with pre-configured reasonable defaults for everything. It bundles all the necessary dependencies. And then server.live requires you to explicitly provide configuration layers. And that means it requires you to provide your dependencies explicitly. And that's what I'm doing with server.live right here, and then with the layer right there. So we have everything up and running. I'm going to come back over here and let's start this. So it's Scala CLI, and I call that one 102, and we'll go ahead and run that. Okay, we have the messages starting the server, and server started right there. And as I note up here, I am running this on port 9090 now. So I will do a curl http://localhost:9090. And I'll try that root URI first. And you see we don't get anything back there, which is exactly what we want. I did that with the I option so we could see more informational output here, and you can see we're getting a 404 not found. And the reason for that is because I don't have a route over here. I only have a route at /hello. So if I go back up here and now add hello right there, now you see we get an HTTP 200, okay, text/plain because our handler is response.text right here, and then the line of text that I have right there is coming up there. So that's all I really wanted to show you in this video was this configuration part. So you've seen how to do that right here with the server config default and then changing only the parameters that you want to change. And then I showed how to provide that as a Z layer right here and also use server.live for this situation. That being said, while I'm here, I want to add one more thing because I started off with this URI and then you get the 404 not found right there. I'm going to show how to add something right here so I get rid of this error and have something a little bit nicer there. So what I could do here is I can create a root route. So I'm going to have a root route, and that's going to handle the GET request at the root URI. And the reason I want to show this is because it's kind of interesting. You come to this point right here and you're like, well, it's the root URI. What do I put there? Nothing like that. And there's actually something built into ZIO HTTP, and you can just say root like that. And then we can say, I want to use capital handler like that, and then dot. And now you can start to see some of these built-in helpers right here. And if you've worked with HTTP a lot, you should be a little bit familiar with some of these, like bad request, forbidden, internal server error, method not allowed, not found, and so on. But all I'm going to do right here is just use OK. So that's the root route right here. And now I want to show that what you do is you come down here and you add root route right there to the list of routes. We'll save that. So that's all to do in the code. Then over here, I need to kill that. And let's go ahead and run that again. Okay, so server's up and running. We'll come back down here. Hello should still be working just fine. And there you see that result. And now I can come back to the root and I should see something from this OK code right there. So we'll come back here. And there we go. We get the HTTP 200 OK response right there. So again, I wanted to add this route right here for two different reasons. One was to show you how to handle this root situation right there. And the other is to show you that in the real world, what you're going to be doing is creating routes like this as separate values, and then you'll be putting them inside of routes down here just like that.